One of the most crucial jobs the government of any country has is to provide its people with quality, safe, and healthy food. And while the UK may not be known as the hub for the best organic products, it seems that the recent strategy the government is trying to implement has gone south. So what exactly is going on in the country, and why are people upset with this new strategy? First up, a half-baked strategy. The government has said food will be grown in greenhouses, covering acres of land under proposals to increase self-sufficiency to help guard against future economic shocks. Backing farmers is the focus of the government's long-awaited food strategy for England. The strategy announced recently has been described by critics as half-baked. It follows a landmark review of the food system by restaurant owner Henry Dimbleby, who said only about half of his recommendations had been taken on. But the pledge to back farmers has been welcomed by the National Farmers Union and the Soil Association. Health and sustainability groups have slammed the government's watered-down national food strategy, claiming it will fail to tackle food insecurity or get to grips with the obesity crisis. A raft of organizations said the much-delayed 27-page document has proved the government did not have the will to take bold action to address the problems of the UK's food system. This comes at an extremely bad time when the country is facing an economic crisis, and the Ukraine refugees problem is taking a toll on its people. Next, obesity on the rise. One of the main problems that the UK is struggling with right now is obesity. The whole point of the strategy recommended by Henry Dimbleby was to address these concerns. It's not as bad as the US, but good to see them taking action. The restaurateur wanted the government to review the food policies followed by the industry and take strict actions against those who violate it. But the strategy was published in two parts, with part one providing suggestions on how the public can gain access to economical but quality healthy food, and part two focused on how the government can strategize the supply chain and enhance food security. Food safety and regulations have become a major cause of concern in the country, and frankly speaking, we think the strategy recommended by Henry was actually a good call. But of course, the government also has to look at ways to cut costs and provide a middle ground solution. After all, the UK is facing a lot of problems with its economy. The entire world is. So one of the concerns people have is that obesity is on the rise in the UK. Get this, according to the NHS Digital, obesity rates in both reception-aged and Year 6 school children increased by around 4.5 percentage points between 2019 and 2020 and 2020 and 2021. That is the highest annual rise since the National Child Measurement Program began. And if that isn't a cause for concern, then we don't know what is. Now for the risk of diabetes and other illnesses. While obesity is one of the major causes of concern in the UK, it's not the only thing that's become an issue in the past couple of years. Diabetes and cardiovascular diseases have become common in the country. Whilst both type 1 and type 2 diabetes are characterized by having higher than normal blood glucose levels, the cause and development of the conditions are different. About 90% of people with diabetes have type 2, 8% have type 1, and about 2% have rare types. Diabetes mellitus is a significant global burden for healthcare. There are approximately 537 million people worldwide living with diabetes, and in the UK, around 6.3% of the adult population aged between 20 and 79 have the condition. So you can just imagine the predicament they're in. But like we said, diabetes is just one of the most common diseases on the rise in the country. There are around 7.6 million people living with heart and circulatory diseases in the UK. An aging and growing population and improved survival rates from heart and circulatory events could see these numbers rise still further. And not to scare you any further, but heart and circulatory diseases cause around a quarter of all deaths in the UK. That's more than 160,000 deaths each year, or 460 each day. That's one death every 3 minutes. Lastly, an extremely disappointing move by the government. The Food Foundation has gone on to call the government's partial use of Henry Dimbleby's strategies a major disappointment because they believe they cut out a major chunk of the good ideas he had proposed. And get this, so Dimbleby also proposed a revised bill that could provide people with nutritious food at economical cost. For a country that already suffers from diseases and illnesses as well as obesity, England could really use some of these changes. By having equal access to nutritious, organic, and healthy food, the country can actually curb these diseases. We hope that the government can reverse its decision or implement better changes by consulting experts. Next, in other related news, an overweight England struggles to break the junk food cycle. In decades of treating NHS patients in Yorkshire with weight problems, Dr. Chinadorai Rajeswaran has noticed two things. One is the extent of their excess weight. 50 15 years ago, you had a lot of people with a BMI of around 40. Now it's common to see people with a BMI of 50, 60, 70. You're getting super obese people. The others are in sheer despair. People have become more introverted and depressed, which leads to poor diets and an unhealthy lifestyle. The government this month released its food strategy for England, seeking to address the obesity crisis. But health experts said the measures it set out were far from enough to help people like Rajeswaran's patients. Ministers rejected a key proposal put forward by independent advisor Henry Dimbleby. A tax on salt and sugar aimed to encourage food manufacturers to reformulate their products. The strategy did include funding for obesity research and trials of community healthy eating programs. But experts said these would have little impact on a UK obesity rate that, at 28%, is worse than any European country apart from Hungary. And now, obesity's effects on the UK is devastating. Obesity has wide-ranging effects. Experts say adult patients suffered conditions including heart failure, diabetes, osteoarthritis, kidney and liver disease, and depression. Type 2 diabetes alone costs the health service £10 billion a year, and the number of children being treated for it has doubled in 5 years. Paul Gately, professor of exercise and obesity at Leeds Beckett University, said that while conservative governments stressed individual responsibility, research showed environmental factors, including deprivation, availability of junk foods, and transport methods, were behind obesity's rise. Obesity's prevalence in deprived areas is almost double that elsewhere, while the poor lack access to services such as personal trainers, which Johnson used to combat his own weight problem after a bout of COVID-19 in 2020. Next, new food strategy for England gets flack from environmentalists. Henry Dimbleby, food advisor for the UK government, criticized the newly published food strategy for England. According to Dimbleby, environmentalists have criticized the blueprint that was intended to address a variety of health and environmental issues. Much of the concerns about what isn't included, such as steps to shift people's diets away from meat that is intensive in greenhouse gases. Instead of a meat tax, Dimbleby proposed a reduction in meat consumption by 30% over 10 years, as well as behavioral nudges. However, there's no mention of reducing meat consumption in the strategy. It does, however, include plans for randomizing controlled trials held over the next 3 years to generate evidence that could eventually lead to long-term dietary policies. As a result, any encouragement to eat less meat is still a long way off. Alternative proteins are mentioned briefly, but no new money, policies, or details on how people can be encouraged to switch to them are promised. Instead, the strategy focuses on providing livestock with additives to reduce methane emissions. According to Jamie Newbold, an expert on additives from Rural College in Scotland, there is evidence that additives reduce emissions. Nevertheless, he claimed that drastic cuts will necessitate a behavior change, implying that we will need to eat less meat. And he claimed getting additives into animals will be difficult because nearly all of England's cows and sheep graze in fields. The strategy has been criticized for lacking plans to help the environment. And finally, UK government plans to cap £50 million for food strategy. Dimbleby proposed £500 million to £700 million in annual environmental agricultural subsidies to help nature recover and store carbon on farmland. The government has established a landscape recovery scheme to support such projects, and Environment Secretary George Eustace told New Scientist that expanding woodland cover and restoring peatlands will be one way to achieve UK's net zero goals. Nonetheless, the government announced a week ago that the scheme's payments would be capped at £50 million over the next 3 years. The Wildlife Trust Barnaby Coop, a non-profit organization, is concerned that the scheme has been watered down. The government also stated that it will consider requiring large corporations to report on greenhouse gas emissions generated when people eat and drink. But it doesn't seem like they will listen to the concerns environmentalists have for now. With diseases on the rise in England, one can only hope they do listen. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about the government's strategy? Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.